Um, we have another speaker, and we want to get to our next speaker. Really embodies the American dream. At the age of 5 years old, she was left in an orphanage in Seoul. Today, she's one of the most powerful women in sports. Kim Pegula, co-owner of the Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres, here to talk about her story and really just what it's like to be an owner in an environment, a very dynamic environment that is changing constantly. So thank you so much. We want to talk about a lot of things. One of the questions I want to ask you, and forgive me, but what's it like being a very successful woman in a sport that is so dominated by men?
It's awesome. I'm sorry. I'm not.
Is it really
lie.
all awesome?
I'm not trying to make anyone jealous, but I have the best job in the world. You know what? There's a lot of challenges, of course, but I can tell you, I'm having so much fun. I love.
Was there
what I
ever
do.
any moment though where they're like, "Oh, Kim, what does your husband think about this?"
No. You know what? My husband and I, we've been married for about 27 years, and he has been a great partner of mine. And I remember when we talked about the bid coming up to buy the Bills, he's like, Kim, you got to get on board because I can't do this, and without you, and certainly that. So he's always been my biggest supporter, and I've been very grateful. But then at the same time, he's like, all right, you go do it. So he's like, it's great to have the support, but then you realize you're the one doing all the work. Not always, but that's what it feels like sometimes. But it's great being an owner, being a female in football. Like I said, I'm so blessed, and I love it every day.
And so, what's the big challenge for you? This is great. I'm going to use your mic. So what's the big challenge for you right now in 2020? Obviously a lot of focus this weekend because it is the Super Bowl. It's a good time to sort of take stock of where you are as an owner. What's number one on your list?
Really, we would not be here without our players and our fans. And so every year, regardless of our wins, our losses, every year is a new challenge because the 49ers were, they were almost one of the worst teams last year, and this year they're in the big game. And so every year is different, and you can't always count on what you did right or what you did wrong. But the fan base, trying to re-engage with them, all the new technology that comes through. You got new players. The struggles that any business have when you don't know what it is. So I think that's really it is. Just how do we keep engaging our fans? How do we keep building on what we have?
How do you do that? Because we've had some conversations in planning for this. Jason and I talk about it with our own families, that there is so much, and I think George Pine used this expression, like competing for some mind space. So how do you want the fans at the games, but you also want to keep them engaged when they're away. So how do you compete with so much that's out there?
Well, and we found that, we used to think that you could kind of compete with another club, or you're competing against another league, basketball, hockey, whatever it is. But we found that we're really competing for people's time and the convenience because they're able to do, go on their phone and get a ride to wherever they want to go. They can have groceries delivered, right to your door. And so people are now expecting out of their experience all the ease and convenience that they're getting from all these other industries that, before we didn't think were our competitors, but certainly now they are because they want that same level of expectations from our fans do.
And Kim, how do you create a club and create sort of an ethos around the club that's reflective of the city? I mean, Buffalo is an American city in so many ways, for good and bad, especially now in 2020. So what is it about the team that reflects the city?
Well, you know what, I really do. There's, sometimes I feel like we can't, as a club and the league, sometimes they have a lot of rules, right? And of course, we got to play within those rules. But I think that authenticity that, we talk about a lot, I think that you have to really embrace that. So in Buffalo, we have this thing called Bills Mafia. It was not started by the club. In fact, we kind of really shied away from it because we're like, oh, that's kind of like a negative undertones. We're not, not that kind of family. And so, but but that's what the fans like felt like they just embraced it as their own, and now we're like, no, let's partner with that, let's embrace with that, because that's who we are. So really understanding our core fan, who we are, and then allowing them organically, naturally, to help us really be who we are as a team. And if you any of our players, you'll see there'll be like a shout out to Bills Mafia. Like they get it too, they feel it.
All right, for our Bloomberg Business Week listeners tuning in around the country, we're here in Miami talking to Kim Pegula. She is the president and CEO of Pegula Sports and Entertainment, owner and president of the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres, we should point out.
So one thing I want to ask you is, you are thinking about, and it's some of the conversations we've been having here up on stage, is that you want to think about your existing, maybe older fan base, right, who want to interact with the game and the team a certain way, and then you got your younger consumer who you also want to engage because you want to have them around for decades to come. How do you balance that as a team owner? You know, you've got to think about resources and so on and so forth.
I think that is so hard. I mean, that is one, you asked me earlier about one of the struggles, and I think that truly is. It's the best thing about sports. Like our fan base is anyone from like, you know, a new baby that's got their like my first game shirt. And then I've got, you know, people that like 100 years celebrating their 100th birthday at a football game. And so how do you cover that whole, I mean, it's the best thing, like to have that fan base that spans so many generations, but it presents a lot of challenges.
Well, speaking of challenges, we just had 4, you know, incredibly successful athletes who have moved on in some ways, you know, co-founding businesses, co-founding a league, some still playing. We talked a lot about the role of social media, players using social media, managing their own brands. How do you as a team owner kind of get your hands around that? What's your view on that?
Well, no, I'm very big proponent of our players having a voice and a brand, because I do think, like I said, they are representing your team, and the players aren't coming to see me, they're coming to see our players, and I think there's such power that they have with the influence, and if we can help them. So we have a program, the league has done a much better job in the recent years of allowing for that, and so we have a program where we actually, well, because you know the players on game day, like they're supposed to be focusing on the game, but they've got fans, they got family, they want to have fun, and so we like provide extra videographers, extra camera crew, extra people that will take pictures, and we'll send it to them and say, hey, we're not using this. Why don't you can share it with your fans, or you can share it with your family. You can do whatever you want with them, because social media is time consuming. Oh my goodness, I have a Twitter account and I got an Instagram, and it's like, it's a lot. And now we're on TikTok, right? So like you got to do the Facebook for your older generation now. Then you got to do TikTok, which are completely, and everything in between. It's a lot. It really is.
So Kim, I want to talk a little bit about hockey in a minute and some of the opportunities that you see not only in hockey, but as you think about the northern audience. We talked a little bit about this backstage. But before we do that, I want to bring up a conversation that Carol and I had yesterday with Jerome Bettis, the bus, well known to this audience, about diversity in hiring at the top levels. As an owner, obviously you are deeply involved in all of these discussions, not just for your own team, but across the league. What does the league need to do to bring more diversity to the higher ranks?
You know, I believe that a lot of what we really need to do is really at the grassroots. So, and there's been some great strides, as we talked about, with an extension of the Rooney Rule, but you know, now trying to get that with coordinators and trying to build that pipeline. But you know, it's got to start at such a young age, right? But we're getting where those young girls or guys or kids, they're able to see other people of diverse backgrounds, colors, religions in higher places. But there's just not enough of them, right? Yeah. But at least we need to get that pipeline in and start at a grassroots level. The numbers just aren't there.
So how do you get the numbers up? And I think about the tech community facing crisis because they don't have the workers, either boys, girls, going through STEM education. So they have actively created programs at high schools and so on and so forth. How active do you think the league needs to be, team owners, to creating programs like that?
So, I mean, I know from a business standpoint, you know, the entry level in Buffalo, our biggest struggle is that nobody wants to leave, right? So we don't have a lot of turnover. So we don't have
in the organization.
In the organization, I mean, you know, it's a small community, very family oriented. So people have grown up in the same job for many, many years. So we don't have a lot of turnover. So that's been a little bit hard. So we try to bring in people from the interns, the entry level, to at least give them some experience. I've talked to Syracuse University. My son goes to Syracuse. They have a great sports management program. They have a program for women. I forgot the name of it now, but But anyways, and so I come and speak with them as well. And they just, you know, like there is such a want. I mean, they want to be participate. They want to be a part of it. And I think it's just showing more of them that, you know, this is a career path that you can choose at a young age.
And so let's talk about expansion, expanding the audience. You know, Buffalo, and this is not a knock, not one of the fastest growing cities in America, unfortunately, right. A little chilly. And yet, there's a big population around you. You know, you're the only sort of big football team for miles around, and not just a U.S. audience, but we were talking with our Canadian friend Eric Schatzker backstage. Toronto could be a place for expansion. Is that on your mind?
Well, I have to be careful because like Toronto is like a really bad word in Buffalo, right?
From a hockey perspective.
Yes. Well, from a hockey perspective, and then when my husband and I were, you know, in the midst of purchasing, we were competing with Donald Trump, and we were competing with John Bon Jovi and a Toronto contingent. So we, it was crazy to think we were.
Who was the hardest competitor? Was it Trump or Bon Jovi?
I think, well, no, I'm going to say it was Toronto by far.
Okay.
It was Toronto. So there was always the fear that the team would move.
Yeah.
So we kind of shied away from that, knowing how the fan base felt. But they are, you know what, they love football as well. And obviously they have the CFL, so they're familiar with football. They love the NFL. We're so close to them. So we need to that's going to be a priority of ours. Football, as you know, we've gone to London games. We got two stadiums in London. We played in Mexico City. So, we want to try to make the game a lot more global, and the league is doing a big push for that. And so we're going to, like I said, put forth our efforts. And Toronto, it's our neighborhood, it's our backyard. And I like to say I'm part Canadian because when I was adopted, like you said, my family came from Canada, so they were Canadians by heart. And of course, in hockey, we always play the Canadian national anthem at every game. So I feel like I'm part Canadian, so it is definitely a priority for me because it's a huge market up there.
Curious about when you look out at the next, I don't know, what kind of, I feel like, lane do you feel comfortable about making commitments when it comes to building out the team more or doing things in terms of fan engagement? Do you have 5 years of visibility? I mean, there's so many technologies that people are talking about, whether it's AR, whether it's VR, 5G, and how that's going to impact the fan experience. What kind of visibility do you feel where you can make commitments to do things for the future?
Well, so like I said, we do have a stadium lease that is going to be expiring soon. So all those things that you just talked about is certainly foremost in our mind. But I truly believe, my husband and I, we've only owned the team for 5 years, right? Right. And this is the first year, though. So what I'm really focusing on now is really making our business in kind of our own, in our own mold. So they had one owner before us, Mr. Wilson, who had passed away. And so you can imagine that there was, he bought the team for $25,000, right? And so our goals and our needs, are vastly different from his. And so I think for me, the priority really is really to understand the business, to create it and shape it into kind of how our needs for our family, how do we sustain it long term. And then I think once we get that really where we need to be, then all this stuff is easier to put in, right? Because it is so ever changing. And but if we don't have that core base, that foundation of business, I think that's it's all that stuff is going to be just so much harder to navigate. So that's where I'm really focusing my time right now, on the leadership, on setting up our business and practices, just trying to set us up for. I've got 3 kids, so trying to set them up for their future.
Well, and I believe one of your daughters is a professional tennis player, right? And so you are seeing lots of different sports, both as a parent and as an owner. As you think about the popularity of sports going forward, the NFL obviously remains number one. Can it stay that way? I mean, with all of this competition.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I love the game, and I think the National Football League has done a wonderful job of growing the sport. But it is our players and it is our fan base. So I think if we keep investing in those two areas, either as a club or as a league, that we're gonna get the return from there. This past year, we opened up a new sports performance center. You know, back there, you'd be like, hey, these guys, go do 50 reps, or 50 squats. You're just like lifting weights. Well, now we've got like cryotherapy chambers, and we've got sleep pods and floating tanks and all these like very things that really are to help our players really not, step away from the game, help them make their career last longer, help them recover quicker, prevent injuries. And that is a huge component. And like I said, every club and every team owner is making those types of investments in the players on top of all, the normal course of the day. And then, like I said, and then the technology part for our fan base. If we keep investing in those two areas, that's where we're going to be able to sustain the growth.
Well, and I want to pick up on something you said a minute ago about, you and your husband buying the team, from Mr. Wilson. That was obviously a seminal moment for that franchise, but it's also representative of a change in ownership that we're starting to see across the league, especially as you talk with your fellow, quote unquote, new owners. What's different about them? What's different about this sort of new cohort that's coming in?
I would say, first of all, there's a lot more diversity. I certainly think that if you go, not just speaking for myself, but there has been a lot of new female owners that even just in the 5 years I've been in the league are now sitting in the room, per se. A lot of second generational families now, daughters and sons are going through and becoming new owners. And I think a lot of them they grew up in the business, right? So, a lot of the, say Jerry Jones, he started bought the Dallas Cowboys, but now his kids are growing up in it. So I think it's a much more engaged ownership. Like I said, I'm new, but I like to think I'm young at heart, and my kids will grow up too. But I think that's the difference in the ownership now, even when there's a lot of changes, but there's also like even a lot of changes within. It's that next generation that has really grown up and is not the original owner anymore. And it's a lot of fun. I think it's just developed a new kind of, I think, bond, we appreciate the stories from before, but like we all kind of start making our own relationships and stories. Yeah.
Well, there's some benefits, right? We know of diversity of thought. So if you're bringing in some more women or people from different backgrounds, right, in terms of what it brings to the league.
Right, yes. And so what was the question?
No. I'm just saying, we see all the research that's been done about having kind of a diverse board and so on and so forth. So you think about the benefits that can do for the league.
No, it does. And you know what? I love a lot of the club's owners are actually very family based. And that's what I do love about the league. There's a lot of family that are part of it, because my husband and I, we're very different, but together we work. It's
great.
What he's good in, I'm not as good in. What I'm good in, he doesn't want to do. So it makes it work. So I think that's really an advantage.
That's how we are.
Yeah, there you go.
So we have to ask you, we've been asking a lot of the folks up here on the stage, Sunday's game, the Chiefs or the 49ers. Have you thought about this?
Oh my gosh, this is like on the record, so I mean, I don't want to offend either family. So I'm just happy the Patriots are not in it because they are in our division, and we've had to play them. We've had to play them for almost 19 years in our division. So so I'm happy to see another fan base get the opportunity if it's not us.
All right, one last question.
Well, I was just going to say, you also have the notion of, a really young quarterback from the AFC and Patrick Mahomes, who has really re-energized, it feels like, that part of the bracket, as it were.
It is, so our quarterback, Josh Allen, is only, has 2 seasons under him. Patrick Mahomes, even, you saw Lamar Jackson. So all these young quarterbacks are really are the next wave of level, of excitement and for our fans, and that's really exciting to see, to be a part of that, because, like I said, that's our future, is our players and our fans.
Yeah, you definitely see this era. All right, one last question. If you had to pick one priority for yourself as a team owner over the next few years, what would it be?
One priority? Probably to enjoy the game more. I know. You would think that the game would be like the most exciting. It's so stressful for me. I'm like, I need to learn how to enjoy the game. Win or lose, I need to learn how to enjoy it.
A little tailgating, a little beer
Yes.
might help.
I have done that on occasion, but I got to do it more often because, like I said, I'm so fortunate, so lucky. Best job in the world. I got to enjoy it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you.
Kim, thank you
All right,
so much.
thank you
Really
so much.
appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everybody.